Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com or download the app in the iOS App Store to get started today. Use code SPOTTRACK, get yourself $20 on the house. Hit some of our flash markets up. It's NFL trade season. That's going to be the start of the show today for us. And you can start your trade season at Bettor Edge, predicting the future. These flash markets are exactly that, predictive betting based on Spot Track data. And we've got 9 potential trade candidates live in Bettor Edge flash markets. Pretty simple stuff. Is A.J. Brown going to be traded? Yes or no? Is Russell Wilson going to be traded? Yes or no? You can take either side of that action and make a couple dollars back on our behalf. Again, use code SPOTTRACK when you're registering and get yourself $20 to work with today. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Thursday, October 9th. I buried the lead. We're going to start with some of this trade stuff. We've got 2 decent-sized trades, both surrounding the Cleveland Browns to get to early on here. And then Dan Soemann joins to talk about the Yankees as they enter off-season mode. And then how about a double guest Thursday? Keith Smith, our resident NBA expert, is going to pique our interest with some of this Giannis stuff. It's maybe fool's gold today, but worth a damn tomorrow, to put some words in his mouth right now. But that's the back end of this show. Football, then baseball, then basketball. Let's hit it all on a Thursday. All right, the Browns are busy. We knew they would be. This is one of the teams that maybe won't be wholesale sellers because they're playing decent ball, especially defensively speaking. And that's why yesterday's trade, a cornerback for cornerback swap, is somewhat interesting. But let's start with the first one, which is Joe Flacco leaving town and heading south to Columbus. Well, kind of, Cincinnati. Joe Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals as of Sunday, per Zach Taylor's words, not mine. And the Bengals get him at $1.8 million for the rest of the season. Some of that's per game active bonus. There's a $250,000 roster bonus on the contract that he only earns if he's on the Bengals roster to finish the season. So still some things in flux. There's obviously plenty of incentives built into his contract, which you can see on Spot Track. Some of them with team wins, playoff wins, etc. We're a long way away from many of those vesting. But it's Flacco and a 6th for a 5th. And I got to tell you, that's pretty good work for the Browns, who started with 5 quarterbacks, are down to 2.5. I'm going to make Bailey Zappi on the practice squad a half, even though there's a world where he gets promoted Sunday and he is the number 2 quarterback and Shedeur is still the number 3. And I'm going to start there real quick because there's a lot of talk about this and I get it. Dillon Gabriel had a pretty good showing in London against the Vikings. You got to think of it this way. Number 1 start, already a bit against the wall because of where he came from, what his college career looked like, where the Browns are right now. And that's maybe one of the toughest defensive coordinators in Brian Flores to go against at all, let alone for your first start in an international setting. Just a world of chaos around you. Pretty good showing from Dillon Gabriel. He's going to get the runway TBD, right? Indefinitely. If he slips, that'll be time for Shedeur. But until then, you've got to keep Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders as separate as possible on this roster, at least on paper, so that you quiet at least as much as possible the media hounds. Because the second they smell blood with Shedeur, it's going to be all Shedeur. When is it time? Is it going to be this week? What does he have to say about this? They're already doing this. They're already putting a microphone in his face anytime possible. But it does seem like the temperature of the room in Cleveland is decently calm, giving Dillon Gabriel at least a fighting chance to go out there and succeed. Because you have to think about it this way. And they, by the way, they've now told us out loud that this is the plan. They're going to get as much run with Dillon Gabriel as they can so they understand where he is for 2026. And at some point in time, we should all fully expect Shedeur Sanders to get a good 3-week run in 2025 so that there's a handle on what he looks like heading into 2026, because neither of these players have to be here next year. Their guaranteed money is gone, dissipated. So both could be gone, both could be back, but the plan for the rest of 2025 in Cleveland at this position is, what do we have at least for one more season so we can head into training camp and certainly head into March with a handle on how that looks. As for Flacco, it's just life support at this time, right? He wasn't going to start because of what I just laid out. He wasn't going to start in Cleveland anymore. There was a team that needed a starting quarterback. There's no question about that. Was that going to be Wilson? Was that going to be Jameis? Was that going to be Cousins? No, it's Flacco, who's the cheapest of this bunch, as experienced as any of these players, and has proven time and time again that he can just be dropped into a situation and be successful. So you have to understand here that this is Cincinnati saying out loud to us something they don't do mid-season. We're putting our best foot forward. This is a better version of Jake Browning right now, certainly a more experienced, more decorated version of a QB1. There are better weapons out there. You know, the Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, etc. is a better outlook than what he just had in Cleveland, but the offensive line is not. So there's no expectations for what Cincinnati can do, but kudos to them for at least throwing something into the wind here for the next 12 to 13 weeks, if it does get that far. Cleveland, back to them quickly, because the Tyson Campbell for Greg Newsome with a late round pick swap is super fascinating. Number one, it's a cornerback for cornerback. We don't see that very often. Starting cornerback for starting cornerback. That's even more rare. Okay. I mean, somebody on Twitter quickly commented on this trade that kind of the last version of this to a grander degree was Goff for Stafford, you know, and that was off season, and that was the writing was on the wall with, I think, both of those players to a certain degree. This is in season. This is a team in Jacksonville that is now leading the AFC at 4-1, tied with Buffalo, and a team in Cleveland who we've just kind of given our assessment of, which is they're not going to be the number one pick this year. They're not. They're going to win some ball games through the rest of the season because the defense has pieces. There's a running game. And quite frankly, when healthy, 4 out of 5 of their offensive line are pretty darn good vets. And there's a brand new starting left tackle that they're trying to get as much experience and reps as possible right now up to speed. So, you know, there's tangibility on that roster in Cleveland, and the division around them is kind of crumbling, right? Cincinnati included. So there's a world where they're in the mix for a 500 record with Dylan Gabriel. But there's no question that Tyson Campbell is a downgrade from Greg Newsome at the starting CB1 position, at least the left CB. But this is all about money. This is all about contracts. This is all about contention and windows and things like that. Newsome was on the 5th-year option, like 13-7, fully guaranteed through the rest of the year, obviously, and then set to be a UFA in 2026. They probably had mild discussions with where do you stand financially, and then he went out and had 5 pretty good weeks in Cleveland. Put his name on the map last week a little bit. You know, this is a former first-round pick who had been treading water a little bit and now is starting to find traction in his walk year. That's a bad recipe for a lot of teams looking to keep this player, especially a team like Cleveland who is not looking to break the bank too much. Now, they did it with Myles Garrett. You know, they handed Jerry Jeudy a contract, which isn't crazy. They're going to have to pay some of this offensive line because for those 4 veteran players I mentioned, all of them are pending free agents, with the exception of Jack Conklin, who's kind of got a 1-year option essentially built in here. So there's going to be some work to do there. And then, of course, there's the Watson situation. His $46 million next year is fully guaranteed, obviously. There's going to be a cap credit. To what degree, we don't know yet. If he misses the entire season, it could be significant. If he misses 3/4 of the season, it'll obviously be less than that. But there will be an insurance-based cap credit for Watson. And by the way, there has been each of the last 2 seasons. He's had signing bonus payback from a cap perspective in each of the past 2 seasons. And many teams have been able to benefit off this because of insurance policies they have in place. It's just not something we post publicly, or obviously the teams talk about publicly. But there could be sizable cap credited there, which obviously helps all this conversation. However, with Newsome specifically, and where the cornerback market has gone, you know, $30 million a year, it's just not the right time for Cleveland to lock in that piece. They're going to have to flip over Denzel Ward here, probably, if not this March, the March thereafter. And this is about draft picks. It's about draft picks. So Cleveland now brings in a player in Tyson Campbell who's had the bulk of his guarantees paid for. That's $14 million last year with a signing bonus built into it. And that's basically $14 million this year. Okay. Because it was mostly a big option bonus that stays with Jacksonville. And, 3/4 of a $1.5 million base salary plus some per game active bonuses. That's what Cleveland takes on. It's about $1.4 million for the rest of the season. Now, $13 million of his 2026 salary is already fully guaranteed. And you can say, well, that's a chunk of change for a team that might be going backwards, but they're not really tanking. They just don't have the ability to tank. A, because of Watson, B, because of Garrett's contract now, and C, because this is a front office and a coaching staff that probably makes it to 2026, but is going to be sitting there on one of the hottest seats in football. So there's just no reason for that team to tank. If anything, everybody out there, with the exception of Garrett, is playing for their next contract, playing for their next job. That's a pretty good recipe for a team that is kind of stuck in the middle. So they're looking for experienced talent. They're just not looking to break the bank with that talent. And Greg Newsome was playing himself into a situation where minimum $18 million a year, that's probably the floor for his extension right now, which is, lower second tier cornerback pay. And if he has a great rest of the season, which he was on track to be and should now on one of the best teams in football, arguably speaking, in Jacksonville, that's only going to go up. That's only going to get into 24 to 26 million a year, which is high second tier money at the cornerback position. So he got priced out of a future in Cleveland because of where they stand. And Jacksonville now has a chance to give him a 12-week showcase on a defense that's really taken massive steps forward, and then be in position to pay him that money. They have other mouths to feed, right? Travon Walker is going to be heading towards a fifth-year option. Devin Lloyd, an option they declined this for next season, is having a breakout all-world off-ball linebacker campaign, at least to start 2025. You saw that big 99-yard interception return off Mahomes this past Monday. He's done plenty of those kind of things this season to start, and he's heading towards a walk here. So, you're looking at a $17, $18 million off-ball linebacker contract, maybe $22 million for Travon Walker to keep him on the edge for the next couple of seasons. Maybe Travis Etienne at running back gets a small couple-year extension to stick with his compadre there, Trevor Lawrence, who's certainly rounding into form. And then this Newsome contract could become the next big one based on how the next 12 weeks go. So two very competing situations in Cleveland and Jacksonville, and a situation where this team has now done business twice this offseason, stemming back to the draft with the Travis Hunter move, which leads me to the final point to be made here, which is Cleveland's not going to be the worst team in football, but they are going to be one of the teams that have the most draft capital. Now, it's not, as good as we've seen. But, there's plenty of time for them to do more. There's more trades to be made on that roster in Cleveland, and the November 4th deadline is still a few weeks away. But this is where it stands right now for Cleveland in 2026. It's 12 picks, according to our data. 2 firsts, a second, a third, a fourth, 3 fifths, a sixth, and 3 sevenths. Again, a lot of that is out of the top 100, but it's ammo to work with, at least starting right now. And you sneak in another second or third round pick with maybe a move over the course of the next few weeks, and you're really starting to talk about something where you can build off a core that they've established. And I think Campbell fits into that 2026 core, at least early on here. But Junkins, Judy to some degree, and Njoku's going to be a bubble player for us because of his contract situation, but maybe he sticks around for one more. And then one or two of these quarterbacks that we referenced, bring back some of the offensive line to shore that up and keep that consistent to some degree. And then it's players on the defensive side of the ball that we referenced. And then you start filling in 2 first-round picks, a second, maybe a 2/3 if you can make that happen over the next course, a comp pick here or there. That's what you're looking for a team that is trying to get back into playoff contention from treading water, which is where they're going to be for the rest of 2025. But you understand this team doing this. I expect other teams to kind of follow suit here. All right. We've talked about Carolina. They've had a couple of gutty wins, right? But they don't have an answer on Bryce Young yet. And until they do, it doesn't make sense for them to be uber aggressive at this deadline, next offseason, etc., until they know deep in their heart that all right, this guy's going to be with us for 2 more seasons, including the 5th-year option, or the exact opposite, which is we've got to start thinking about his replacement right now. And if that's the case, there's going to be a hell of a lot of pieces to turn over before they get to that point, because it's going to be subtract by addition. And that makes life a little harder. But we'll talk about some of the teams that should be selling pieces. We mentioned the Browns a bit last week in our trade candidate segment on last Thursday. And again, have some fun with it. Go to bettoredge.com and bet some of these trade possibilities before the deadline here tonight, and make a couple bucks off this stuff, because we've seen some of the names that we've already referenced now get moved. And I do think 1 or 2 names that we have out of the 9 listed in those flash markets are going to get moved. But I'll let you go and pick those out yourself. Throw a couple bucks on them yourself and make some dough. Trade candidates will continue to pile up. We're going to have a trade candidate view, including all the ramifications at the deadline, live on Spot Track, probably by the time you're listening to this, as we flip the switch into full mid-season mode for the NFL. Let's talk some baseball with Dan Soemann. All right, Dan, it's a happy trails to the New York Yankees. That's why we're here today. Not tons to talk about surrounding this team, especially because I think, and we'll start here, you expect this coaching staff, this GM, to be back for next year despite the early exit out of the playoffs?
I think so right now, until I hear differently. That's my default assumption, but things could definitely change, right? We've seen this in the past, it's just the right time scenarios. It might be getting close to that, but I don't think it's quite yet to put a bow on it. But
yeah, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of angst internally, despite I'm sure there's plenty of it happening on the socials right now with how things just kind of went down. But a somewhat successful season. They flipped over the Juan Soto situation, kind of kept afloat. There was obviously a bad stretch down the stretch in the dog days of the season that kind of led to making this a much more difficult task through the postseason. But I mean, they went up against a juggernaut here in terms of a team that was just mashing the ball left and right in them. And that didn't happen for the Yankees, unfortunately, which they're not called the Bronx Bombers for nothing. When they're not hitting the ball out of the ballpark, it's really tough for this team to create runs, despite the fact that they are a different version of themselves than they were even just 5 years ago. A lot of it still resides around that mindset. So I'll put this on you. Do you think that will change at all in 2026? Do you think there'll be a focus on generating more runs, playing more complete baseball, or is this team still going to be built through Brian Cashman and with the mindset of the old in mind of we've got Judge, we've got Stanton still. We're going to look to those as a 1-2 punch, and the rest is just going to have to fall in place.
Yeah, I think they're going to maintain a lot of continuity, I would think. There's some spots in the field that they might want to upgrade, but I mean, like, what do they do with Anthony Volpe? I think that's like a major thing this offseason. Jazz Chisholm still has another year of control here, but is that somebody they look at? I mean, we kind of saw his frustration not starting game one. Is that just like an organizational guy they look to move on from and fill that hole? I just look around and it's kind of like, where are you gonna upgrade drastically? I mean, from a talent perspective, there are spots to do that, but you know, there's money committed as well. So
yeah, I kind of put you on the spot here, but you because I do want to get to those 2 players and a couple more here. You're hitting the nail on the head, but before we talk about all the rash decisions that could be made there, what does the pipeline look like? What does the prospect pool look like for the Yankees, especially for 2026 as they're going to flip the switch here? Is there a name or 2 from a positional standpoint that can come in and compete for starting jobs or even just active 26 roles here?
There's some fringe guys that might break into the league. People who are closer to the Yankees might be screaming a name out loud. I mean, Spencer Jones is the guy we heard last trade deadline was quote unquote untouchable. Circles that I pay attention to thought that was laughable if he's actually the type of prospect that the Yankees are calling untouchable. So nonetheless, in terms of somebody who's close to the major leagues, could be an impact offensive player. Outfielder Spencer Jones probably fits that bill. They do have some promising young talent, but not, I mean, further down in the minor league system, but not necessarily going to make an impact next year, that you would at least want to rely on, right?
Yeah.
Like we saw, not to skip ahead to Anthony Volpe though, but we saw how patient and dedicated they were towards him. They didn't sign Carlos Correa or any of those shortstops that were available that year, saying Anthony Volpe is our shortstop of the future. It looks like it backfired here. How patient they'll continue to be, but so I'm making that point to say they probably shouldn't and or won't want to rely heavily on any of these young guys next year.
All right, that's fair, and I think it's probably the best approach for the front office and the managerial staff to think a little bit more of experienced, right? Which leads me to this. You mentioned 2 names. I'm going to give you 4. Because I think there's a world, Dan, where if I'm a Yankees podcast this morning, waking up saying, how do we start this offseason talk? Every single infield position for me is a question mark. Every single one. Now, Ryan McMahon at third has 2 for 32 fully guaranteed sitting on his contract. All right. So that ain't nothing. And they kind of just went through this with DJ LeMahieu, by the way, who's going to be $15 million on the books for them next year because they walked away from that contract. And McMahon is an upper echelon defensive third baseman. That's why he was brought in the system, because Volpe was garbage and they needed something to resurrect the left side of the infield, defensively speaking. And he's done that job. And by the way, his home run yesterday damn near saved their season. So he's not a zero. By any regard, he's not a zero. He's also not $16 million a year. There's no question about that. So we walk into 2026, and if you're a fan who's pissed off that, the season just kind of crumbled in front of them to a division rival, you're not looking at Ryan McMahon and saying, great, hands are clean. We've got this guy for next season. You're thinking, great, we've got this guy next season, right? That's what you're thinking. You're grumbling about Ryan McMahon and his $32 million guaranteed. And then you look to his left and it's Volpe, which speaks for itself. He starts his arbitration in 2026. We projected at about $3.5 million because he has produced, despite the fact that the consistency, the defense is all a mess. So it's not going to be a zero financially. It's going to be millions of dollars. You go to the left of him, and it's Jazz Chisholm, who might be the most expensive new salary on your roster at a projected $12 million of arbitration for his final season and his walk year. And then you go to his left, and you have a complete TBD at first base. Goldschmidt's going to walk. I don't think they bring him back in any regard. Maybe it's Ben Rice. Maybe it's Pete Alonso, who knows? But for right now, it's a complete TBD. So I don't have any substance with a single infield position for the New York Yankees heading into 2026, and that's pretty wild, right?
Yeah, that's all. I like how you laid all of that out. There are definite question marks. If they're ready to make a move there, there's room to make a move there. It's just it'll take a bit of a bold move. Moving on from Anthony Volpe or something like that.
Like if this was the Yankees of the old, and I know it's never going to be, the kids are never going to be like Dad, but at some point in time, this team is going to go all in. And by the way, I think they tried to go all in 2025. They're not getting enough credit for what they offered Soto, what they offered a couple other players, what they paid Max Fried after paying Carlos Rodon. They have paid some of the biggest offseason contracts in the league over the past couple of seasons, and they tried to pay Soto $700 million. They did. And the Mets just said, we're not going to be beat, and they weren't beat. So they're getting kind of crapped on incoherently here, in my opinion. They did try to be uber aggressive in 2025. So let's just say that they have that mindset again in 2026. Ryan McMahon is a perfectly feasible bringing him in the 7th inning for defensive purposes player. He just is. Now, 28 out of 30 teams would never do that with a $16 million player, but the Yankees could feasibly be one of the teams that does do that. In other words, Dan, every big offseason free agent or trade candidate we have on the list at third, short, second, or first should be connected to the Yankees this offseason. And there's a world where, Pete Alonso and everybody, right? Every single name that we're talking about here is on the Yankees list this season and could completely reshape this infield and essentially the batting lineup as well. But I'm going to turn it on its head here quickly before I get you out of here. Is this pitching staff playoff ready in 2026? Or is this more of a complete roster conversation than we're even having right now?
I think the staff is in place with the caveat that Garrett Cole returns to
That's right.
somewhat health. I mean, Cole Rodon Freed is a great start. I mean, we saw Cam Schlitter down the stretch.
Yes.
Luis Heel was a Rookie of the Year candidate or winner last year,
Winner.
finalist, I believe.
Winner.
Winner, correct. Sorry. Clark Schmidt, you have just like names down the depth chart that could either be used as trade bait to improve the offense somewhere, or just depth down the staff, which is so important. We've talked about this. Teams use anywhere from 10 to 15 starting pitchers throughout a season, pretty regularly, not exclusively, but pretty regularly. So I think the staff is definitely ready to go, where if they can kind of, soften the edges of the offense a little bit, of the issues there, I think they're well on their way. I mean, this was a good team. I think we're just so used to the World Series or bust expectations out of them that we're willing to poke holes in more stable situations with this team than we are with other teams, I think. But the staff is great. They still have offensive cornerstones. It's just how they kind of work the edges of that roster, in my opinion. And that's going to come in the form of some like probably aggressive moves, whether that is Jazz Chisholm, whether that is Anthony Volpe, Jason Dominguez in left field. Seems like a five-tool former superstar expectation player that just like hasn't really panned out. I think he needs more runway. He's so young in the like this, the raw skills are there, but how patient can they be with these young guys is really what it comes down to. All across the board. That's Ben Rice included. Like, are they ready to give Ben Rice a bigger chunk of first base next year?
Yeah.
That would affect whether they're looking at a Pete Alonso type, or let's call it like a Reese Hoskins type. So there's
or even
big
Bellinger.
question marks everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, and let's start with Bellinger quickly. Is he coming back in some regard, Dan? Because we think the opt-out happens, but is a return to the Yankees make sense for both sides here?
I think there's room for it, but ultimately, I mean, are Yankee fans going to be thrilled if their offseason move is bringing back Cody Bellinger? Whether he was a good, solid player last year, I'm not discounting that. But like if there's a clamor for like big moves to be made or some offensive, reform going on here, then I don't know if they're going to want to commit the big chunk of money that it could very reasonably take to re-sign Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, we've got him on a 6 for 180. I know you don't love that term, but I think that's probably his ceiling out there with some Godfather offer in free agency if it gets to that point. I think there's mutual interest there for no question, but you're right. We'll see how aggressive they need to be elsewhere. But quickly with the pitching staff, I couldn't agree with you more. This is one of the better starting rotations on paper right now heading into the offseason in the entire league. The last month, you can say that the Yankees kind of busted out here, but they now have a handle on Schlitter, right? They know that this guy is going to be maybe their number 4, which is pretty darn good because he's probably a 3 or a 2 in some instances across the league. And you mentioned 2 guys behind him, Schmidt and Heel. Again, they're probably 3s on way worse situations, and they're going to be the 5-6 split for 2026, assuming that Garrett Cole comes back healthy. That's a really nice setup, and I'm going to give Cashman some more credit here. They're going to let Devin Williams walk. They're going to certainly let Luke Weaver walk. He might not be allowed back in the Bronx ever for the rest of his life. They're already replaced. David Bednar comes in with a high, expected high arbitration price, but he's under team control. And Camilo Doval, love him or hate him, he's got back end of the bullpen experience. He's probably going to be the 7 to start 2026. That's already check marks on the box, right? That's done. The back end of the bullpen. Now they'll bolster it with something, but they're in really good shape on that side of the roster heading into 2026, which leads me to believe a Jazz Chisholm trade, a Dominguez trade, a Volpe trade, and then really aggressive fill in the blanks, especially if, and I'm going to look at it this way, and maybe it's wrong, especially if they think it's got to be an all-in season, because maybe not so much Cashman, but certainly Aaron Boone is going to be sitting on an absolutely scalding seat when training camp starts. Spring training starts in February, and there's no question about that. So I would expect sweeping changes. I would expect a sniff of Yankees old this offseason, where every single name is going to be publicly attached to this team, and it's rightfully so, because they might be a couple of corner infielders and a couple of bats. Maybe those are the same things if it's Alonso, and, we'll see. Away from being into the ALCS and in serious contention and competing with maybe Boston and Toronto again next year when it's all said and done. But I don't feel terrible about this team because, they have way more pitching than most teams enter the offseason starting off with. So I think we're on the same page here.
Yeah, I want to buy into that, and I think that you laid the point out beautifully. The market is like the available pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Is what I struggle with. Like, there's not a lot of great fits there. I mean, the best offensive, projected AAV, our projected AAV, Kyle Tucker, Bellinger, Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman, Kyle Schwarber. Like, Schwarber would be a great bat there, but I mean, you're not plugging the DH spot.
No, not with Stanton in your life.
So there's a lot of other caveats here that when I'm like trying to one for one, like where could they upgrade center field? Trent Grisham offers great defense, underwhelming offense. There's not a lot of great options there. So when I'm looking around the room and trying to match names to the team, to specific spots open on that team, man, I find it hard, but I do want to believe that they're gonna push chips in and say this is.
But I'll say this too. I'll say this too. Let's just assume that Dominguez and Volpe and Chisholm are on the block, because I think that's pretty fair, at least out on the outset here. Those are chips. Now I realize Chisholm's in a walk year, so he's not going to be as valuable as he was even 12 months ago, and he stumbled a little bit in 2025 as well. But those three names, especially the younger players, despite the fact that neither of them are going to be top prospects like they came in the league as, let's put it that way, they are valuable on other markets. And the Yankees probably aren't out there looking for AB prospects in return because of this discussion. They are looking for veteran, ready, experienced, plug-and-play infielders. I guess, can we just say that? Right? They're looking for specific Major League Baseball ready players. It's way easier to get those trades done when that's the return you're looking for. It's way harder to go out and try to get a number 8 prospect that you're going to have 6+ years of control with, because teams just don't want to part with those players. But you start looking at the Rays, for instance, who have players that they don't want to pay $10 to $12 million next year because they're trying to build a new stadium, for instance, right? Or the Athletics, who are peaking and have players, but that there's going to be a limit on what they can afford over the course of the next 18 months. They're going to have Major League Baseball ready players that the Yankees can pull from those rosters immediately. So I think it's going to be easier to do than most teams would have in trying to flip the switch here quickly. And I would expect this team to look different, but just as potent next season.
Yeah, nothing to add there.
All right, before we get out of here, I'm going to give you these numbers. Ready? Here's what the Yankees are projecting to have spent in 2025. All right, for an ALDS exit with their rival Blue Jays. It's a $320 million tax payroll, which is about $78 million over the threshold, which means you have to add about $61 million to that, which means $380 on the books. That's what the 2025 Yankees were worth from a tax perspective. And if I flip back to 2024 with Juan Soto in tow, it was about the same. 316 plus 62 was about 378 on the books. In other words, they were basically the exact same team, financially speaking, 2 years in a row. We'll see if they want to keep the gas pedal down, because that's a lot of cash to be burning. That's a lot of tax bill to be burning. And they didn't make it back in playoff appearances, let's put it that way, because they only had a couple of home games there. But I don't expect them to dial it back. And if anything, I think they may be a little bit more aggressive, pushing towards that Steve Cohen $400 million line. But we'll have to wait and see. Appreciate your time, man.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right. It's Keith Smith time of year. NBA is almost here. We're about, 12 days out from the NBC Sports unveiling of the NBA offseason. I'm actually super excited for NBC to be back in the fold. But Keith, welcome. I apologize that we have to start with some hot stove stuff here, but it's also that time of year because deadlines spur actions, and the start of the season means something has to give. We didn't get much from LeBron. Let's not even go down that road. So let's talk Giannis, because Shams Charania and ESPN have at least piqued our interest with the fact that Giannis, his publicist, his agent, somebody attached to Giannis Antetokounmpo, has given the idea that if, and I'm air quoting, if he were to leave the Milwaukee Bucks, that the Knicks would be a likely destination down the road. So I guess down the road is what I'm asking you here, Keith. Where are we with Giannis? Not so much this season, because I think it's pretty safe to say he's a Bucks right now. But what about it thereafter?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, too, just to add to this, when he was asked directly about it, Giannis basically reiterated some of what was in the reporting. I really want to win. And then he said, look, I'm here. I'm all in. And I don't think anybody doubts that. I think when he shows up, he's doing everything he can to win games. And I think he's going to do everything he can for Milwaukee. But then he also said, and if I change my mind in the future, then I'm allowed to do that, or that's my prerogative, however he put it. But that was kind of the first time we've heard Giannis directly say, like, hey, I might change my mind. And I think where we're at is, like what you said, he's going to start the year with the Bucks. I don't think we're getting any monster eve of the season trade that goes down or anything like that. If the Knicks want him, there's a whole host of complications there. The Knicks have no draft picks left to trade. And then that means getting either a third team involved that can route young talent and draft picks to the Bucks if they want to rebuild post Giannis, or getting the Bucks to take on 1, 2, 3 guys from the Knicks roster that have some big money, because you got to match salary for Giannis and go in that direction. And that could be a challenge as well, because a lot of times when a team trades a superstar, we usually see they pivot and say, all right, we're tearing it down. We're going to rebuild. And the Knicks just don't have all that attractive of a, hey, rebuild package. And for everybody who says, because I had a couple Knicks fans come at me and say, well, they can just turn around and trade those guys. That's not how it works. The team's not like, yes, give us what you don't want and we'll take care of it for you. So that's where it gets complicated. But then now I'll add, kind of as I continue to add caveats. We know in the NBA, when a superstar says he wants to be somewhere, more often than not, the superstar lands in that place. And it doesn't always happen. Look at Damian Lillard, went to Milwaukee, not Miami, but there are times when that's how it goes. But Giannis isn't a free agent right now. He's got this year, he's got next year, then he's got a player option in 2027. So this is really one where the Bucks don't need to feel any kind of pressure right now, unless it's, oh my gosh, we got the Godfather offer. Let's do this, get it done. They can play this year out, do what they can to try to keep him happy and in Milwaukee, and then readdress next summer, when at that point, that could be, now we're walking down the line of this might be it for him and with Milwaukee, and that has to change your decision making.
Okay, so that was going to be where I took things, right? Is this contract, this 3-year 175 is just about to get started this season. It's really a 2 for $112 million and change because of that player option, which is usually fool's gold in these conversations. But it does matter for his trade situation, right? So right now it's a 2-year guarantee plus a player option. But this time next season, or next July, I should say, he'll be walking into basically an expiring contract with that player option being very much in doubt. That's the perfect time to start talking about this, right? That's when Giannis Antetokounmpo and his party, and for lack of a better term, the Bucks as well, will want to be aggressive about this. This is when a new team will want to be acquiring him with one guaranteed season left. They'll probably tack on the extension at that point in time, right? Kind of a trade and sign type situation, and then go from there, right? That the writing is on the wall next July, not right now.
Yeah, it's spot on with that. There's just no pressure right now. Giannis is not the kind of guy who's going to mail it in and just show up and do the bare minimum. So there's no pressure for the Bucks right now to move him. Once we get to next summer, like we are into, like draft season and beyond, now he has transitioned to, he's got 1 year left on his deal. And that's where we've seen in the past, Anthony Davis, really good example, told the Pelicans, hey, you can keep me, but at the end of the year, I'm leaving and I'm going to the Lakers. Now, the difference was the Lakers had the ability to create cap space and go get him. So they could do that. If Giannis says, I'm going to the Knicks no matter what, even when we start talking in the summer of 2027, the Knicks are not going to have cap space. Like they're still going to be over the cap with their roster. That's even without extending Karl Anthony Towns. They've just got between Anunoby, Bridges, and Brunson as their three biggest deals, kind of largest to smallest. That pushes them as an over the cap team once you fill out the rest of the roster. So that's where he can't kind of wield that hammer. But I can tell you, and I'm working on 2026 cap space projections, NBA teams are treating this as a 2-year window right now, 2026, 2027. And I was talking to multiple people over the last couple of weeks who said, look, right now, free agency's been a little dead. It hasn't really been much because everybody extends. But we're in a period where going into this coming summer and the summer after, there's guys who either can't extend or it doesn't make sense for them to extend, or they're guys who are maybe looking to make a change. And we all know, like, these things go in waves. Nobody changes teams via free agency. Then all of a sudden, when the right mix of teams have enough cap space and the right guys are free agents, all of a sudden free agency is a thing again.
Huh. Okay. I want to look at two different directions, and then I'll get you out of here. So one is, because maybe this isn't being talked about enough with this whole scenario, what is the outlook for the 2025-26 Bucks? Is this team in contention in the East? Is there a world where this team is actually good enough to convince Giannis next summer to stay all along, and this is just completely moot?
Maybe, but probably not. Okay. I think so I like to think of things in terms of tiers. And in the East, I think the Cavs and the Knicks are in a tier of their own at the top. Then you have teams like Orlando, Detroit. I would put the Bucks in that grouping, but a little lower in that grouping, simply because the Bucks, their team's just a little weird right now. Like, it's not bad by any means, but they don't have a lot of ball handling. They don't have a lot of creation. Their shooting could be a little iffy. A lot is going to fall on Giannis to really kind of create everything for their offense. Like, they don't even have Damian Lillard anymore to kind of do that heavy lifting. And a couple of the other guys, it's guys who can do some of that. We've seen when they do too much of it, it doesn't go well. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be a challenge. Their roster also, it feels a little unfinished. It feels like there could be maybe a trade that comes down the line, and that could change things. And then, of course, we always see somebody we think is going to be really good. It just doesn't happen. Either the fit isn't right or they have a bunch of injuries. And that's where I think Milwaukee, maybe their luck turns. They've had multiple playoff runs really since winning the title where they've gotten into the playoffs and either Giannis or Dame or Chris Middleton were not there and they weren't healthy, and it made them fall earlier. Maybe they're due for that run where they're healthy and somebody else isn't, and they make a run that way. But I think if you're Giannis, contention is we either better be in the East Finals and in a very close series or actually in the NBA Finals. Other than that, I think anything short of that, you're going to have a whole lot of reporting whenever it is their season ends from then till whenever that, hey, he's now opening it up. And by then it may be, all right, I'm going to open it up beyond the Knicks. Maybe it'll be the Heat, the Lakers, the Clippers, maybe Dallas, Oklahoma City, who knows? He may say, hey, I really want to win. And, this is it. Other thing I will say with the Knicks that was kind of interesting. I don't know if you picked up on the part, his family has moved to Athens. Like, that is now their permanent residency. The only direct daily flight from the United States to Athens is out of Newark, New Jersey, which I know if you live in New York, a lot of times you fly out of Newark because it's, just as convenient. And that's the only direct daily flight to Athens. So not saying that's, why he wants to be in New York, but just saying that is at least an interesting little quirk in all of this.
So you're saying the Nets have a chance?
I mean, the Nets have said
they're going to have cap space.
They said for years, like, without saying it very directly, but like, Giannis is the dream target. Like and they're going to be sitting on cap space again next summer, and they could be sitting on cap space in the summer of 2027 too. And just and when I say cap space, I mean it could be 50, 60, 70, 80 million in cap space if they really want to go that direction. I mean, they don't have very much long-term money on the books that isn't rookie scale salaries. It's kind of Michael Porter Jr., and that's only a couple years left. So they're going to be in position to do something at some point.
Yeah, that could be the Giannis Jaylen Brown combo in Brooklyn to start the whole thing over again.
I mean, maybe,
right? I mean, that's the players right now. How about this one? You and I talked offline for a decent bit, because whenever these things come up, especially the timing of it, the way it came up, who brought it up, there's always a silver lining. Why did this happen? Why are we hearing this now? What's the motivation? Who actually leaked this information? All these things come to my mind because I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know you have too. Hearing you talk just now made me think about this approach, and I wonder what your thoughts are with it. The Knicks and Giannis have made sense for a while, but this version of the Knicks that you're laying out, it doesn't make sense. Certainly on the basketball court, it'll help, but what they're going to have to give up and how they're going to have to go about giving up those pieces is about as complicated a process as we have in sports, not just the league, but with the aprons, with the trade restrictions, with the rules of engagement, all of that. It's crazy complicated. Is it possible that the Knicks were told, you're in next summer? Start to make this work right now. And this is the Knicks going to Shams Charania and saying, hey, just float this out there for us, because we need every team in basketball calling us about Anunoby and Cat and Bridges, etc., so that we can put together a 5-team trade to get this thing done next July, because there's just no other way possible. Is that, you think, part of this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. Like I think what's important to note is Karl-Anthony Towns is extension eligible. So I think what's going to be a major tell with him is, does he extend or not? Whether it is trading him direct to Milwaukee for Giannis, the only reason I'm going there is that's just what makes sense salary-wise. It keeps everything without the Knicks traded 7 guys for Giannis. Like, it just keeps it a lot more simple. Giannis and Cat, honestly, that's like kind of a dream front court pairing because they offset each other quite a bit on both ends of the floor. But we'll see, where it goes. But so that's part one. And if you extend him, all of a sudden, whether it's Milwaukee or another team, maybe, oh man, we were kind of looking at ride that contract out for one more year, and then we have a big expiring coming off the books, or we could trade him as an expiring or whatever. So if the Knicks do not extend Karl-Anthony Towns, that says to me, all right, maybe there's something going on here. Okay. They extend him, and they can only tack on a couple years, but they give him a couple more years on his deal at max or near max money, which I'll also note we have not heard with Cat the whole I'll take less to stay in New York thing, like we heard with Brunson and Bridges almost from day one that they were together. Even Josh Hart too, when he did his extension. So I'm not sure where that's at. And if there's no extension done, all right, maybe there is something here. And I think you're right with that part with the Knicks of, hey, let's kind of we'll float it out there. Like, hey, we at least already started the process. And that's the other thing I always try to remind people. Trade talks are very rare. It's not me and you making a fantasy football trade and we bat forth 5 text messages and then put it in the system, right? It is rarely that way. It is more, you kind of lay the groundwork, and then there's weeks to months to sometimes a year worth of conversation of, are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? Especially the more complicated the trade is, which this would be. So that's interesting. I'll also say this. I'm not going to rule out that there wasn't some involvement on Giannis's side here, because I think what Giannis, through his comments and through all this reporting and things, is I think he is trying to lay the groundwork to let Bucks fans know, hey, this may not be for life, right? Like, and Giannis will sign a 1-day contract there, retire a Buck, and have his jersey retired and everything else. We all know that, but it may not be the only games I ever play are for the Bucks. And now when when we are sitting in next June or July and it is trade time, it is, hey, I told you like a year in advance, like I might not stick around because what I want to do is win, and I don't think we're there. And that's where I think you have to kind of factor in. Sometimes these guys lay the groundwork early because then it's, I told you like earlier, so then they don't feel like there's much of a bad guy. I don't know if you saw Kendrick Perkins like fully called him out and was like, he wants to be traded and he just won't ask. Like he's afraid to ask. And it's like, maybe, I don't know that that's the case, but I also, if it is, I kind of get it. Like this has been the only place he's ever played in the NBA. I don't know that I think in his ideal world, they would be in the finals this year and he can just stay and feel great about it. But I do think he's kind of laying the groundwork a little bit of, hey, just so if this comes, this isn't coming out of left field and you don't know what's happening here.
Is there any world where the Bucks want to trade him?
Not right now.
I wouldn't think so either.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's always the put asses in seats guy, even if they're in ninth in the East, right? It's just the safe haven that a small market needs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you always have hope when you have Giannis, right? Because outside of a handful of players, you go into any playoff series with, we have the best guy. Yeah. And sometimes in the NBA, the best guy really wins a title by himself, but he can win a series because he can win 2-3 games by himself, and then one game you hit a bunch of 3-pointers, other team shoots poorly, and next thing you know, you won the series. And that's where you always have that hope with that. I will say if we get into next June, July, and there's even any kind of waffling, I don't think they want to, but I think they will very much resign themselves to, we need to get in front of this, because otherwise now if we don't have control and it starts becoming, you know what, I want to go to this team only, that can really mess things up for that. I will say teams have been a little more like, well, hold on, it's a trade. We control the process here. Like, you're not going to just pick a destination. Like, that has happened a bit more, but it's still fairly rare. And I think the Bucks would be like, all right, let's not start sending a message of, hey, give us, a decade and a half of great basketball. Then at the end, we're going to send you to, NBA Siberia somewhere just because that's the best offer. You want to set the tone of, we take care of our guy. Like, we love him. We'll always love him, but this is what's best for him and us, and go from there. But yeah, it's certainly one, because it's, Luka never really got put on the market. So this is a whole different level of player that's, potentially available. And you better believe, I'm sure John Horst, the Bucks general manager, is getting calls from every other partner in the league, just saying, hey, just like Giannis, like what would it take from us? And that's where, like, Doc Rivers got very angry. He's like, everybody calls everybody, and that doesn't mean talks are happening. And I agree with them, but that, again, that's kind of how it starts, right? Because, like, the Luka trade wasn't a thing until they were like, hey, we want AD. And they're like, yeah, we want Luka. And they're like, okay, well, and it's like, maybe there is one of those out there for Giannis where it's like, actually, we're winning. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Now that changes things. Maybe we are a little more interested. But today, I think let's just run it out with our guy and do the best we can here.
Well, the Knicks better hope that there's a Luka situation out there for them, because they don't have more than 2 first-round picks really to part with here over the course of the next 4 seasons or so. So they're going to be behind the 8 ball.
Good. Like, they're good anyway. Like, that's the
why ruffle it, right?
Yeah, and I've seen some Knicks fans be like, we got to do everything we can to make this happen. I'm like, that's the exact kind of thinking that kept you being like a top 44 win team. And that was where you topped out with first round exits, because it was just go get name guys and give up whatever it took to get them. And it's, Giannis is awesome, but if you don't play this right, next thing you know, it's like Giannis and Jalen Brunson and a whole bunch of random guys. And it's like, what happened? Like, where are we at? And you're not any better than the Bucks are today. Like, they're pretty good. And I will say this too, because I saw it's fandom, right? And people get excited. Like, imagine adding Giannis to this, and it was like the Knicks starting 5 with Mitchell Robinson. And it's like, how is, like, what, this is not just, this is not shut off salary cap in 2K and move the guy over for, Pacom Dadier. And now we're 9 million miles over the second apron. There are rules here. Like, you're not getting them while you keep everybody. Somebody's got to go, but that's how it works, right? You got to give something to get something. And Giannis is certainly a pretty good something.
Well, that should inspire all of you to go to our NBA trade machine.
Absolutely.
And, select the Milwaukee Bucks and select Giannis and start playing, because this is not going to be easy. But our trade machine does make it easy, because it tells you all the rules, and it tells you when you've stepped wrong.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of it that Keith has been the mastermind behind. So appreciate your time, and
had a little bit of help with that one, but that's okay.
I mean, you just told everybody what to do, and they did it. That's how it goes around here.
In this world, in no other phase of my life is that how that works.
Well, we're happy to have you for that regard. Good stuff, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, my thanks to Keith. My thanks to Dan. My thanks to the Yankees for bowing out early. Always good to see that. My thanks to NFL trade season. Always good to have that kind of content. We're off to a banging start with 3 nice trades, and it's not even October 10th. The deadline's November 4th. Use the NFL trade machine on Spotric right now. Become a premium subscriber to use these machines and have an ad-free experience across Spotrac.com, and visit BettorEdge.com using code Spotrac for $20 on the house. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot.